There he is. Hey, David.
Hey, guys.
Hey, brother.
How are you? What a crew. What a crew. I feel like I'm on the expedition right now. Wow. I've been watching you two and I'm like, where's my t-shirt? I haven't got one of those expedition t-shirts yet. Paul, please send me one.
Okay, it's a deal.
And I will definitely sign up if you need someone to clean the decks.
It's a deal, David. It's so good to see you. And just for everyone's benefit, the last time David and I saw each other, we were together on stage at the Royal Geographical Society in London on one of the many plastics-themed evenings. And of course, with David there and some of his team, David led us through the Plastiki expedition. It was a really great way to get high focus on what was then not the same subject it is right now. Everybody that has this subject, the four of us could go to, or any of you listening and watching could go to any school anywhere in the world and find all the children and teachers and parents and everybody know everything about plastic. We've got an amazing sense of awareness right now, but when David was doing it, it was the awareness raiser. So we had to come into the Royal Geographical Society and give us talks. It seems like a lifetime ago, David, but it's great that you're here now. Thank you.
It does. I mean, it does seem like a lifetime ago. And obviously, thank you to Joe and to you, Paul, and obviously all the other speakers to be what a roster of incredible speakers, as Enric was saying earlier. Like, I keep on saying to people, look, nature sent us to our room to sort of reflect. Little did she know that we would also be highly inspired and informed and could spend this moment not just reflecting, but reimagining what comes next. And I think if you look at what's happening now around the world, especially through the lens of biodiversity, you know, this was a huge year for biodiversity. You know, who knows what the step back might be, you know, in terms of the, you know, the end of the year in China, we're meant to have a big conference and where will it slip on the agenda? But one thing's for sure, watching these talks, it's clear that we don't need an agenda when you've got great inspirational people like you've pulled together over this weekend of biodiversity to really drive forward. And it's a great example of just how, you know, Margaret Mead, you know, don't ever underestimate a single person make a huge difference. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Like each of you are inspiring. And yeah, plastic, it was a long time ago. I mean, I think, Enric, we met at National Geographic in 2006. We're in the same class, we're dating ourselves. And I remember your talk. And I remember coming up to you pretty early on, and I think I gave you the nickname Merman, was what I called you. And I remember saying, come on, Merman, get involved, jump on the crew. And then I looked at him and I thought, if something would ever happen to Enric, it would be a loss for the oceans. I got to leave this man. I don't want to risk what you've just described of 22 marine protected reserves. Imagine if you had slipped off the back of our crazy boat. So anyway, and Paul, clearly, yes, we were chatting about plastic. And it was one of those things where people were like, okay, whatever, this guy's completely nuts. And I think at the time people were interested in it mainly because I think it was, I think that, you know, we love to sort of build people up to throw them under a bus. And I think there was definitely a lot of journalists and media who were interested because they're like, he's definitely going to die and it'll be quite funny. So I lived and I'm still here. And I thank you for inviting me.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Actually, this is thanks to Elon Musk. It's a VR hologram from Mars that I'm on right now. And we found water. Behind us is water on Mars. That's why we're going there. Are you fucking crazy? Sorry. Oh, kids. Sorry. I mean, Elon, pull your head out of your proverbial and look at the planet here and start focusing on what people like Enric and Paul and everybody else on this feed has been doing. And I'm sure that will come back and bite me in a minute. But
this was the great thing, David. You had the imagination to get people to look at the issue. Perhaps they didn't have a point of view on plastic waste or plastic in the ocean, but they would certainly have a point of view on Plastiki sailing across the Pacific. So that's the clever thing, isn't it? You've got to capture the imagination.
We live in such a fun, you know, we live in such an overstoried world, and I think, you know, we are fighting for every little bit of breathing space that we can get. And sometimes, you know, it makes me sad to see that comes at the detriment of our own movement. You know, I mean, I see a lot of projects fighting against each other, clearly because we're all scrapping for funding. We're all scrapping to get somewhere where we get attention. And at the end of the day, the amount of attention that's gone into the economy recently and bailing out companies that weren't serving any of us, is really sort of, whereas nature should be, on the front page every day. And I obviously have a bias, as probably most people on this feed, but it was a classic. Nature should not be a substrate of the economy. It's the other way around. There is nothing without nature. You can't hide in your room when everything collapses. I mean, it's not. This is if there was ever a warning shot. So, I think there is we have to sort of not only try and engage, on the issues as broadly as possible, as quickly as possible, but we're also forced sometimes to sort of think outside the box, clearly, and have fun with it. But it sort of forces our hand in some way, in a good way. And sometimes it's annoying because you're asked to do things by partners and sponsors that you think are ridiculous. And you go, why am I doing this? And then you realize when you look underneath the ocean, or you look at where you're standing and what you get to engage with and how you get to share that story, it becomes a sort of, I don't want to say it's a necessary evil, but it's part of it. So yeah, building the boat was definitely a bit of a crazy stunt for sure, but which garnered attention.
David, I want to jump in because some people viewing might not know of your work and where some of your adventures have taken you. So I want to give you a quick intro. We have David Rothschild joining us, explorer, environmentalist, eternal optimist. He's ventured to some of the most remote and fragile ecosystems on our planet to bring widespread attention and innovative solutions to our global environmental issues. And it's the 10th year anniversary, right? 10th year anniversary of Plastiki. So building a boat from over 1,200 2-liter pop bottles, sailing at 8,000 miles from San Francisco to Sydney, Plastiki, to raise awareness of the 8 million tons of plastic that are being dumped in our ocean each year. Wow. Where did that idea come from?
It's funny. I was actually, I read this, I just got back from the North Pole. I'd spent almost, I'd done this very British thing and gone to the South Pole and Greenland, and we're quite stunted with our imagination sometimes, like, where do we go next? North, let's go north. Okay, great. And off I went, trudging off to the North Pole. And I got back from the North Pole. I spent 110 days on the Arctic Ocean. And I came back and I was sort of thinking about this expedition, trying to tell people about the Arctic. And I sort of sat there and I had this real moment for myself about, I feel disconnected from this place that I spent 110 days in. How can I ever get somebody to sort of connect with it? And not only connect with that out of sight, out of mind environment, but connect with the issue of climate change, which is so, just not tactile at all. So then I started thinking about my next mission, and I started looking and thinking, well, what could I do? What do we all touch and what do we all experience on a daily basis? And that's waste, our waste footprint. No matter how good you are, no matter how you try and minimize your impact, we have a fingerprint on this planet, and it gets bigger and bigger every single day. Undeniable consequence of human consumption is plastic arising in our oceans, in pristine environments. I'm pretty sure these guys have seen a ton of plastic wherever they are. It doesn't matter where you are. And to me, I wanted to kind of remove the negativity and the energy that I was spending explaining to people that are, well, the climate's always changed. There's no such thing as climate change. You're like, what are you talking about? Well, let's focus on plastic. That didn't exist. Now it does. It's clogging up our marine systems. It's killing thousands of marine mammals and birds. And it's actually affecting the part of our brain as we ingest it ourselves that makes us human, right? So there were so many pieces of this puzzle, and I thought, well, let's go into waste. I started looking around. I read this random little side note in a UN report on the biodiversity of the high seas that said there's 46,000 items of plastic on or below every square mile of our ocean. And I thought, that's got to be a typo. There's no way. I mean, the ocean looks great to me from where I'm sitting, which was probably just on a sun lounger somewhere on some beautiful beach somewhere in Enric's part of the world. And I was probably sipping a cocktail, probably quite drunk, wobbling into the ocean going, everything looks great, which is what most of us do. Like, most of us don't have any contact with the ocean. The closest some of us get is looking out the window of a plane down onto this big blue marble below us. And it looks the same. It looks great. We have no real awareness of what's going on underneath. So I start reading this. I call them up. They say, yep, we don't actually really know. And I thought, this is extraordinary. You don't know. It's a huge number, but we don't know yet how much plastic? No, it was a sort of very early quote. Started digging around, started looking at things. I could find one gentleman talking about it. It was a guy called Charles Moore and the Algalita Marine Research. It's a really large in life character. And I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to take a bunch of artists out to the ocean on a boat, collect this plastic, take it back and build sculptures. And I went to see Jeff Skoll, who had just made Inconvenient Truth. This was in 2006. And he said, well, that sounds pretty boring. He goes, I mean, if it's really this much plastic, unless someone's falling overboard or fighting or there's some sort of drama, what's the final act? you know, and that's such a typical producer, you know, sort of, this is what I mean about doing. So I left there with my tail between my legs going, oh man, what am I going to do? And I remember thinking, what was the most sort of iconic, or at least for me, one of the most iconic, dramatic ocean adventures of all time was the Kon-Tiki. And as I was sitting there, I was like, Kon-Tiki, Plastiki. And I guess I'm a branding, marketing, thinking about how to tell stories. I go, that's my name. Why don't I build a boat made entirely of plastic bottles? And so Plastiki was born as a homage to, you know, Thor Heyerdahl and his merry men. And it was a sort of a look back to say, well, we need to look forward. And that's where it started. And I had no idea whether this was 2006. We didn't sell to 2010. It took me 4 years to try and actually conceive of something, you know, that would keep me alive and keep my crew alive and would do what we wanted it to do, which was basically say, maybe plastic isn't the enemy. What it is our inability to understand the material, how we use it, how we reuse it, how we design for it, its end of life. And maybe our disposable culture and our convenience culture is the one that we need to reflect upon and have a look at and start to question whether or not that's serving us, which clearly it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're 10 years on from that epic journey now.
You can see it behind me. Now? I'm still in the Pacific bobbing around. Will someone please help me? Help. That was always my worst nightmare, was people like, what happens if it like breaks apart and sinks and everyone, you know, and I was like, that's not my worst scenario. My worst scenario is it breaks apart and I'm kind of hanging out on a bundle of maybe, you know, 5,000 bottles that is left over. The rest is scattered across the ocean. And, you know, I'm being pecked at by seagulls and nibbled at by, you know, some tiger sharks who are just trying to take their opportune moment. And then I'm rescued. And then I'm like, then I'm that guy. That was always my worst, you know, my worst idea. But what I used to explain to people was that there's thousands and thousands and millions of pieces of plastic going into the ocean every day. But if we lost one bottle, and we probably lost a few, and I've said that throughout my time, we probably lost a few, we were seen as the enemy. And I think that's another thing that I really want to point out. Like, we're so quick as a species to point out what's wrong. And I think as environmentalists, we're constantly, unfortunately, become the undertakers of wilderness, and a lot of negativity, a lot of fear, and I think people jump down our throats and they try and pick at us. Well, you didn't, you know, serve this right. You didn't do that right. Rather than actually just looking and going, how inspiring and beautiful and brave for Paul and Enric and all the other people who give their lives every single day to dedicate creating a planet that allows us the chance to live on this beautiful marble. And you know, that to me is sort of, I think one of the big things I would say is the takeaway is we as explorers need to remove fear in our narratives and replace it with curiosity. And that's clearly been exemplified by your lineup.
Yeah. So before we move on to a little broader conversation about the ocean, it's 10 years on. What is the legacy of Plastiki? What's going on now?
So the Plastiki, basically, we shipped it to the UK this year. We were going to do a 10th anniversary sort of event. We had a beautiful year lined up, but clearly 2020 has just been cancelled. I'm going to start a petition to say that next year we should just rename it 2020 and start again. But I think basically, we were basically planning on launching in outside the Houses of Parliament, and then we had a tour up all the river systems in the UK up to the COP meeting, COP26 in Glasgow. If I was much smarter, look, I can share my screen with you. I'll show you a nice, hang on a second, keynote here. Look, I can show you a little image. Okay, it's doing way too many things, so I'm not that smart. I'll describe it to you. I use my imagination, but we were going to basically take it on this beautiful tour. Everything kind of got put on hold. So we said, look, let's not pause. Let's do exactly what you guys have done. Let's imagine. I mean, you've been, you know, exploring by the seat of your pants. So we decided to create a new, website. We've put everything up online, and we started to look around. And I was looking at, you know, there's all these days, World Environment Day, and then on the 8th is, you know, Ocean Day. And I was like, funny enough, the 7th of June is a free day. And believe me, it's not easy to find a free day. I mean, there's a day to eat ice cream and throw stuff at your kids and walk like a pirate or talk like I mean, you name it, there's a day for everything now. 7th of June was open. I thought, why not add another day to the calendar? So we sort of said, let's create International Beat Plastic Pollution Day. We've been working with UNEP over the years, UNDP, we've been chatting to them about it, and just introducing something that's focused not just on where we've been, but where we should go. So for me, it's framed as 10 years ago, there wasn't really a huge conversation. Today, we're having a conversation, but we're obsessed by just pointing out what's wrong. And now I would say for the next decade, we need to move forward with all the solutions we have available and start to really act upon the information that we've garnered over the last 10 years and use it as a force and a mechanism for actually, you know, solving these problems that are solvable. so we can get on and eat ice cream and throw our kids over on whatever day that falls on.
All right, excellent. Well, let's open it up to a little broader now, a little more broader ocean discussion. Enric, let's get you back in and unmuted. And let's just start
they
off.
were muted. Oh man, you should have left them on so they could heckle me. There's nothing worse than me just chatting and not being heckled.
It wasn't my choice. It wasn't my choice.
Enric decided to mute it. Maybe he.
So I'd like to go around to the three of you right now, because we see part of this weekend is about seeing some hope and seeing some good things, right? We talk about the variety of life on the planet. We're talking about the challenges it's facing, but I want to do a little round between the three of you for something that makes you really hopeful about the future of our ocean. So who wants to kick it off? Let's go, Enric, down at the bottom, because you muted. So now that draws my attention to you because you muted before.
Okay, so I think what gives me hope is what we can see behind David and Paul, right? That idea, the human ingenuity, right? We can solve this problem. It's just a technical problem and political will. But this is a problem that, as David said, is solvable. So human ingenuity is one of the things that give me hope. And also all these species that we can see behind Paul, biodiversity, they are still here, most of them, right? And we can bring them back. And I have seen marine life come back spectacularly. Before, as Sven Lindblad and Christine Hetterman were talking about Cabo Pulmo. This is just one example of thousands around the world where people have protected areas from fishing, mining, oil drilling. And when we don't kill the fish, they take a longer time to die and they grow larger. And on average, the abundance of fish inside these marine reserves is 600% greater than outside. So these places grow like compound interest. So it is that ability of the ocean to recover if we give it space that gives me hope.
Yeah, I have orders from Sven to say hi. So I don't want to forget to do that before we go on too much.
Thank
so
you. I was watching him.
Excellent. So Paul, what's it for you, Paul? You're one of the most optimistic guys that I know. You can't help but talk to you and just get charged up and excited about an issue. What gives you hope, Paul?
Well, I'm optimistic because at this stage now, we can prove that large marine protected areas work. And we don't have to convince anybody that they do work. And also, sensible management of even the non-completely protected areas does work. So there's a sense now that people are getting it. As you well said, David, this was going to be our year. This was the super year for biodiversity. So we were all at that stage where we weren't popping champagne corks, but we were beginning to say things. I was saying it publicly that within my lifetime, we're going to see the end of illegal fishing. Yeah. We really are going to see the very big commercial shipping organizations celebrating and promoting their success due to management of the seas and large-scale marine protected areas. Everywhere I went to these, these big sort of waypoints in our lives, these big conferences and congresses and events all over the world, there was a real sense of, obviously there's challenges, but there's a sense of we're really getting it. We are the winning team. Now, COVID-19 has come in. We're on the front page. We're in the headlines. Every single paper, even the terrible newspapers, are saying things like Enric's lines. The only true vaccine against a future pandemic is to protect nature. Yep. Now, there are some newspapers that you would never, ever have seen that in, let alone be on the front page. So everybody's getting it. Everybody's getting that our health is reliant on everybody on Earth's health. And that in turn is reliant on nature. And so this super connectedness for our health is really opening. I've never seen such a motivator for people. So people are really getting it. So I think that our global successes and partners and everyone that's made so far, you reach that point. And I think if this had been a super year, we would have really made a step change at maybe next year. But as it is, if we're smart and use this COVID-19 period to think about we're on the front page, things are going to have to change. If we're going to protect what we have, restore what's damaged, and reset our values so it doesn't happen again, what do we do about it? What do we do about it right now in this sweet spot for change? So I'm hugely optimistic, particularly about the oceans. So I'm not popping champagne corks yet. We've got a bit of work to do, but it's exciting business.
David, you share that enthusiasm?
I do. I mean, I share the enthusiasm as an optimist. But I would say there's a follow-up, that I'm a sort of an optimistic pessimist. You know, I think there is a sort of a very human-centric sort of view of this beautiful planet, clearly, right? That gets into a much deeper conversation about the origins of why we're here and how our sort of truth story began, right? It began really as a story of there was a creator, whatever that may be, animalism, God, whoever it was for you. But it was always told as this planet was delivered here directly for our benefit, for our exploitation. And so we have huge momentum and huge challenges when it comes to the word capitalism and when it comes to our consumptive habits and how we view nature as a commodity to be consumed, a commodity to be exploited. You know, the wildlife trade is in the billions, the illegal wildlife trade. You know, yes, we've had a lot of conversations, but, you know, everyone's talking about a vaccine. Well, the vaccine is stop taking animals from the wild and messing with them and putting them in cages and exploiting them for the black market. That is where you start to see the vaccine. The vaccine is saying, if you're buying rhino horn because you can show off to your friends at a party in Vietnam or wherever you might be, anywhere in the world, you know, you should be, you know, ashamed of yourself, not proud. It's not a marker of success. So we have challenges, but as Paul said, and as is being expressed by Enric and everybody else and Joe and you putting it together, the optimistic side of me says that human potential, human ingenuity, human capacity to solve when we're pushed against, you know, a wall. Now, you know, that to me is where we can see some extraordinary things happen. What we've got to make sure is that we don't get sucked back into this vacuum that is the old model, that is the business is what I would call completely unusual and unrealistic, right? We need to be sucked into a new model. We need to look at these companies and corporations and institutions that are so-called, you know, helping the future of society and say, where are you? You were outsourcing jobs. You were cutting your balance sheet for the benefit of, you know, investors, not for the benefit of society, not for the benefit of clean air or for the ocean or all these other things. So I think we have to really challenge leadership in these positions. I think we have to remain optimistic that we can find a solution in time for some of the systems that are really up against it and focus on them. And I keep on saying this. I don't know whether this is someone's figured this out, but someone way smarter than me on throughout. I've always thought we almost need like a date for the planet. You know, I mean, I think back to, if you think back in 2000, you know, there was this, you know, date, which was the millennium bug, and the whole world stopped. We all, wherever you were, you remember 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then it was like, I'm still alive. Ta-dang! We're all right. Now, a lot of that happened. We mitigated, but we had a date. We had a date for the planet. I'm proposing we need a date for nature. There's a lot of dates. I know that Enric's been an author on many of these brilliant reports that, you know, I wish my brain could hold on to all the stats, but there is such an important moment happening every single second of every day. The outside of our world, as much as our bubble, we think we've got a big voice, could be louder. And we need to orchestrate the most important dates every calendar year for the sake and the health of this planet. We need to be able to say, this year, these 4 or 5 species, and this is where we need, this CEO is about to come into this business. And if he's voted in, we will exploit, you know, he's going to continue to exploit the ocean. So let's get him out of there, or whatever it is. And we need to create these dates and these moments. But I do know through optimism, through, you know, as somebody who is seeing incredible work happen when all the things are aligned, I think we are, it's for us to lose, you know, this moment. And I think if we can continue to find support at all the levels, whether it be across business, whether it be across citizens, whether it be across, you know, governments, and we can line up, I do think that we can at least create a planet that's inhabitable by us for maybe a little bit longer. But we've got to pull our fingers out and we've got to start really doubling down. I mean, like, what could you do? I mean, I'll throw Paul back to Paul and Enric, I mean, and you, Joe, and everyone who's watching this, to say, think about it, right? We can just whip up $1 trillion or $3 trillion stimulus package. Why aren't we doing that for Enric and for nature? Like, imagine what we can do. Imagine, because we're not going to get, we need those trillions of dollars for the ocean, right? We really do need trillions of dollars. We extract trillions of dollars, and we have done over the years in exploiting it for consumerism and for, so what would you guys do? I'll throw it back at you. If you had a magic wand and you were written $1 trillion stimulus check for nature.
Well, if I had a magic wand, I will elect you as president. But you know, the funny thing is that, you know, preventing is much cheaper than having to respond to a crisis, right? And exactly. All the, the cost of this pandemic, and Bill Gates had that famous TED talk in 2015, and he said that next big crisis is going to be a virus pandemic, and the cost is going to be about $7 trillion. And everybody thought, wow, that's crazy. This is what we're seeing now, right? The World Bank is thinking about the same numbers as the cost, the losses to the global economy. But protecting, you know, we know that if we want to prevent the extinction of 1 million species and the collapse of our support system, we need half of the planet in natural state and the other half used responsibly, not like we are doing now. And we can start by committing to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030. And that's the big date that this convention of biodiversity we're after. That's the next big deadline. 2030 is something that we can look forward to, something that we hopefully will see. And we have 10 years to protect 1/3 of the planet, the most critical places for our survival and for all this wonderful biodiversity that Paul has behind him. But the cost of this is just a fraction of what governments use today to subsidize the industries that destroy our life support system. Fossil fuels, the worst examples of industrial agriculture, you know, industrial overfishing. You know, this is taxpayers paid for that. And the protection of nature is just a fraction of that. The money is there, right? We just need political will to use it for the right things.
I mean, Enric, you bring up something really beautiful on that one, which is, and I don't think a lot of people actually realize the extent of the subsidies that are going into the fossil fuel industry. It's in the trillions of dollars. The IMF is saying, you know, it is trillions of dollars going in every single year. And you know, I would throw that back at, you know, the UN again and say, look, you've got the sustainable development goals that you're pushing us all towards, which are a brilliant framework for us to work within. But they're going to fail again. They're going to fail because we're not getting the same amount of money that governments are subsidizing, you know, the fossil fuel industry. You know, there's a huge funding shortfall for programming that says that we can achieve these goals. And we've got to be realistic and talk about it. And the taxpayer has to turn around and say, wait a second, do I really want to be giving money to fossil fuel industry? And the fossil fuel industry is as of today, on an annual basis, the largest killer. Why? Pollution, right? The air we breathe is killing more of us every year than COVID. And the response we've had to COVID has been phenomenal in terms of lockdown and the challenge to the economy. And what's the first industry to collapse? Oil. Completely collapse. It's not future-proof. Why? Because it's never had a future. And we've got to stop propping it up. If we could just turn around and say, look, new rules, guys, no more subsidies. Become an energy company. Stop advertising using crap slogans that pretend you are. You're clearly polluting the planet. You're clearly taking more than you're ever giving back. And they should shut those businesses down and say, transition to an energy company, right? And instead of, they spend more money probably advertising that they're doing the right thing than we collectively as a group can ever raise in 1 year just to try and get some information on how to survive on this planet. Like, come on, the stacks are, you know, the cards are stacked against us. We've got to start really hammering those people and go, I'm pretty sure that the new CEO of Exxon or whatever, pretty sure he's got kids. I'm pretty sure if he doesn't, he knows someone who knows someone who knows someone. I've never met anyone who hates nature, but they act like it's, you know what I mean? I've never met anyone who's like, oh, that dolphin's so smug, it deserved to die. Or, you know, I'm so happy that whale breached on the beach. I mean, no one says that. We love nature. Nature is us. So if we attack nature, we attack ourselves. And that's what we're seeing right now. This COVID virus is an exact example. It was grown in the petri dish of consumerism and capitalism and exploitation of nature. And if we don't recognize that, then we're all doomed.
You're on mute, Joe.
I should be my second time doing this today, and I always just say I said something so profound. I don't know if I can repeat it. It was lost. But Paul, I wanted to bring citizen science into the topic because that's something that gives me hope. Seeing people, all the apps that are coming out, seeing people switched on, excited to get outside, find biodiversity. monitor projects for Scripps, for NASA, and take part in this global science community. Citizen science, what role do you think it has to play?
Well, it's done really well. I mean, in the marine world, you know, you can't go wrong. You know, I'm from England, and you think of sea search. Sea search has been going 30 years, and it attracts, you know, vast numbers of divers who have an interest or an affinity towards science. It attracts science groups. It attracts, you know, big teams, small teams, people that can just dip in and out of it. I think it's very clever. You know, like the four of us could pitch up in Brighton tomorrow and think, oh, let's have a dive. And sure enough, we could easily do a sea search dive. They've got really good formats as to what you find. It's dead easy. And they've also done the smart thing of that none of the data ever gets lost. It's not as if you're swimming around collecting this data and thinking, well, you know, what's happened to it? It all gets captured. It's great stuff. And that's led to some of the decent decision making that's been going on within UK coastal waters in the last few years. So it's a great force for good citizen science. We've seen, you know, Earthwatch all over the world. We've seen organizations like Sea Search. And I think that now with this heightened awareness and the biodiversity and condition of nature being on all the front pages, people will be asking what to do. What can I do? What should I do? Then one of the things in the great list is do get involved with citizen science, the same way we are with our backyard bio project. It's a great idea. And we've learned now how to capture it. All of the apps, iNature, Seek, and all those others where this information does get captured. So yeah, it's big news, I think, citizen science, and there's more opportunities than ever.
Yep. So I just want to jump in for just a second because Enric does have to run. So Enric, thank you so much for joining us last night and sharing the resiliency of our ocean. Thank you so much for jumping in today and being part of the conversation. And thanks for tuning in. It's great to know that you were watching along and enjoying some of the speakers today.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me. This is fantastic. David, brother, so good to see you. I'm so proud of you. The Plastiki is still, together with the Mega Transect that Mike Fay did, is the most courageous and epic thing that anybody has done in this century. So,
I don't know about that. I walk on your shoulders. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, Joe, and I was going to say, I don't imagine you running anywhere. I just imagine you swimming everywhere. I'm pretty sure you've got some fins on. If you were to stand up, you were literally just, yeah, you got fins on, haven't you? I know you did.
I wish. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, thanks for joining.
We talked about that backyard bio. Paul brought up the citizen science, and you sent us in a pretty cool video. Can you solve the mystery for us? Paul wasn't sure whether it's crocodile or alligator.
Croc.
Can you imagine what it was like for me, David? There I was on screen talking to, you know, thousands of people, 60-something different countries, pushing backyard bio, having to admit that you just sent in, you know, the one that really set the bar high. Could anybody beat this? And then just suddenly realized just before I announced it to everybody that I didn't know what it was. So I admitted.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I'm down in Mexico at the moment I saw the world going a little nuts as everyone else did. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And it's part of the Chimala Bioreserve. It was a very, very important bioreserve on the Pacific coast here. And I've been here since the 12th of March. I just stayed. I got my 6-month-old, I should say. God, that shows how long it feels like I've been locked in. Daughter with me and my wife. And so every evening I'm out on my bike and biking through the jungle, getting eaten and getting, you know, hammered by all sorts of things. And that little, he wasn't so little, just looked at me and I was like, ooh, that's quite a statement.
So it's a crocodile, right?
But you're right. I'm sitting.
No, I think David's connection may have froze up on us.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased we clarified it's a crocodile, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a lot of feedback from the videos I posted this morning, you know, of what it's like around here. Wow, all those frogs and bird song, and that was brilliant. But I mean, you know what? On the strength of your crocodile, David,
yeah,
we went out last night wandering around the woods here to find something equally impressive, and we couldn't, but I did manage to make a beautiful 1-minute recording of these enormous frogs, which I thought was very impressive. So
amazing. Well, I was going to say, you mentioned Earth Hour. Actually, I had the fortune of going up and seeing Andy Ridley, who started the Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef. And Andy's great. I went diving with him last year up on the reef. We were shooting a documentary for CNN, and it's so inspiring now. I mean, I get this question a lot. You know, people often say, what's your title? You know, are you an adventurer or an explorer? And I often say, look, to me, adventure is a human potential. They untap it. They climb the mountain. They're Alex Honnold. They're people who, love Gore-Tex and are superhuman. And for me, explorers are really looking and challenging our curiosity and understanding how the world operates. And we're living in a golden age of exploration right now. If anyone tells you we've explored our planet, they have no idea what really is going on. We've got devices that can see the planet through lenses that we could never imagine, in ways that we could never imagine. And the best bit about it is, with these weapons of mass distribution, we hit click, and all of a sudden, as you said, everybody around the world can participate. And so, calling out to those guys at the Citizens of Great Barrier Reef, they've got an incredible project if you don't know about it, and I would definitely recommend checking in. Yeah, well, that's an awesome point you brought up. We had Martin Mikowski join us today, and his talk was about the internet of animals and how we can, by tagging the right members of certain species, we can get this feed of what's going on all over the planet, from predicting earthquakes, and things like that. So it's amazing what we can do with technology and how we can then use that technology for good to try and repair some of the damage. Yeah, and I think it gives people hope to be involved. I mean, one of the questions I often get is, for some reason, you go and you do a lecture or a talk, or, and the best is when you go into a bunch of young kids and they rip you apart because clearly they know, they can see behind the whole veil. They go, why, what's this about? And why don't we just stop cutting down trees? But I think what happens is you get to a point where, I would never take it for granted, but we get to go into nature, right? We get to go into ourselves. We've built this incredible world around all of our projects and around how we can operate. For a lot of people, they don't ever get the chance to see or feel or touch what we do. And the tactility of that is it leaves an indelible mark on your spirit that we get to share, and it's our duty to share. And so I think now we're getting to a point where people can say, well, what can I do? How can I feel what you feel? And these are stepping stones now. The technology opens up that you can feed live. I mean, you're pioneering this, Joe. I mean, this is true magic. This changes the way that people engage with nature. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more, David. It's one of the things I've been missing, because I would normally see you and Enric and all of our people and all of the influencers at these sort of waypoints on our journey, these lighthouses, these big conferences, whether they were IUCN or our Ocean or UN, whichever. And I love them because it's my way of knowing how we're doing on our journey, what are the next challenges, where the successes are, and all those lovely corridor meetings where the real action happens sometimes. Yeah. But it's been a question for me as to what we replace them with. And, some of the Zoom conferences and all that don't quite get it, but I think there's a magic that has been created these days. Yeah. Where we bring in, really great people such as yourself, David, and with Joe Grabowski's magic and team, we really do have a genuine, meaningful conference. And we've got 65 speakers, Joe.
Yeah, at least.
Like from 5 continents, thousands of people. And yet, generally, we're only asking for half an hour of someone's time.
Yeah, I realize I've taken up way too much time. There's a bird here, which it's very noisy, called the chakalaka bird, basically. And it sits outside my window. And that's my nickname with my family. I'm the chakalaka. So I probably need to chakalaka off, so you could probably let other people jump into the program. I don't know if it's the end of the day.
This is actually...
Yeah, just for your own sanity, you should tell me there's another speaker. Otherwise, I'll be on here for hours.
Well, I'm going to say that this is the bookend to day two, which has been an absolutely incredible, mind-bending day. And I think let's just leave off with one simple little story from each of you. Just put a pin in biodiversity for us. What's one moment that you had, Paul, when biodiversity just spoke to you? A moment that you go back to when you think about a pristine planet?
Well, for me, it's the polar regions. I love the simplicity of the polar regions. And on all of the dives in Antarctica, unless the ice is being really noisy, you can hear whale song. So the first time I realized that, you might be on a classic work dive or going down to collect worms off the bottom or do sediment samples off the bottom, nothing sort of dramatic and exciting. And yet the first time I realized when my head was under, if I just held my breath for a minute, I could hear whale song. That was really something for me. I really can still hear and feel that every single moment I talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then David, hit us with one to wrap us up.
I was going to say, I'm going to be cliched and I'm going to follow in the wake of a great man and say that it is the same. When you dive for the first time, or you see a whale and you're under the water and you're in the water, whether you're snorkeling with a whale shark or you see a blue whale or whatever it is, that moment, that perspective, that incredible majesty, that can be replicated, in the smallest things as well. But for me, there's just that moment of, falling under the ocean, you're flying, you're suspended in this other world, and then you get lucky enough and humbled immediately. And there's just a charge that comes out in that song, that underwater symphony. And so I would echo that sentiment as well. And, it changes you forever. And I think that is the magic of every single species on this planet. The sound of nature that we are so quickly pushed into the background. And I just thank everybody for giving nature a voice and what you all do to elevate and celebrate nature and its incredible narrative. And if we could just listen, we may not end up in our rooms again being told off by nature.
Absolutely. So one more announcement to make before we wrap for today. It sounds like we're going to have Phil Taylor join us from Open Seas tomorrow, which is pretty exciting. He's been working in wildlife conservation since his teens and involved in Scottish, UK, and international level for over 8 years now. So that's going to be exciting to have Phil join us tomorrow. Paul, thank you for everything you did to make today an amazing day. Thank you for hosting. David, you jumped in for us. Thank you for sharing your story and Plastiki and keeping that legacy going. And I'm excited to have a new day on the calendar on June 7th.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, all the other speakers. It's a real honor.
David, thanks so much for joining us. See you soon. Keep up the great work.
Cheers. Bye, guys.